Hello once again everyone and welcome back to the Zettel. We're joining me once again is Eric, and today we are coming to the final of the Five Meisterhau. We are at the Schaitelhau. Now the Schaitelhau, also known as the scalp cut or the splitter cut, is a bit of an odd outlier in comparison to the other Meisterhau. So of the Five Meisterhau, there are 4 that directly counter an Oberhau and also counter a guard, 4 that directly counter an Oberhau, 4 that counter a guard, and it's not the same one each time. So Zornhau does not have a specific guard counter, arguably it just kills the Oberhau, and Scheitelhau does not specifically counter the Oberhau, though we're going to kind of get to that in a second. It also differs in that it is, on paper, nothing complex, but there is some more nuance to it, at least the way I like to throw it, and we're kind of going to get into that. So this first part, we're not actually going to get into the further plays. We're just going to talk about the cut itself, when to throw the cut, how to throw the cut, and making it more of a thing in your tool bag. Because while the Zornhau is the one that is referred to as the simple peasant strike, I can still see why the Scheitelhau is not, but it should be more to the forefront of your toolkit, in my personal opinion. So firstly, what is the Scheitelhau? It is a 12 to 6 cut. It is going from above down to about the shoulder level. So for example, if I am cutting down on Eric, I'm not turning this into a full down the floor cut. Arguably that is still a Scheitel line, but there's no point for me doing so. It is better for me to cut from here to here, about the level of his neck or shoulders, because that's what I'm trying to accomplish. It's that snap, it's that straight cut on the top to make him have to guard high if he's going to do anything. Which is also why very early on, the first thing they say is that it counters the guard of alber. They don't really give us any other alternatives for throwing it, but we'll get back to that again in a moment. Now, for now, we'll just go ahead and have Eric stand in the alber, a low guard, just so that I have a target to throw at. The text says to spring at him, and I think this is very important. Early on in the days, a lot of people didn't like to use the Scheitelhau for various reasons that I'll get into in a minute, but that led to people starting to try and spring more to the side as they threw it. I don't like doing this. If you're going to spring to the side and attack the head, use any of your other cuts. It'll achieve the same thing, because when you spring to the side, while yes, I'm still cutting to the top of his head, you are more so threatening his upper, from our perspective, right opening, prompting him to do different actions, than you are truly threatening his high line, which prompts him to only do 1 of 2 actions. So, when it says to spring toward him, I do firmly believe that this is meant to be straight toward him. Now, along with this, there is also the distance management. So what I want to make sure I have when I fire my Scheitelhau is I don't want to end up closing with them. I can, that is one way of doing so. And certainly if we're like in, not so friendly fencing and I'm then going to hurt him, by all means, crash into him, do as you know well, a la, for example, Fiore's cut from Botalonga. But if we are more worried about back and forth, either friendly or because I don't want to grapple Eric, what I really want to think about is measuring out this shape. So my hands are about the level of my Adam's apple, so that my sword can come nice on his head, or into his head for that matter, because it's probably not going to split his skull fully. My hands are nice and straight and relaxed, and my foot is decidedly forward. This is the shape I want to create, so I should measure out my distance such that I can spring into that shape, achieve that hit, and not get any closer than necessary. Because along with this is also the sweet spot for hitting. You can still hit here or middle blade, but if you really want a good Scheitel, as we'll talk about next week, you need it to be in the weak, because I need that tip velocity and that tip relaxation, which also is where we get into the whole hand thing. So you will see depictions of the Scheitelhau that look like this, exactly like I'm laying it on Eric, and you'll see ones that look more like this, where the hands are more up and relaxed. I see no reason for these to be mutually exclusive. I think your baseline Scheitelhau, and this is going to be a through line, should be just a 12 to 6. Either from above or from your right shoulder. It is just using my left hand to pull and my right hand to activate both lats, just down. That's all I need to do. Nothing more complicated than that. On top of that, if I want to get more extension, I add what the fingers are doing to it. So when we normally throw a cut, we're not just using our arms. For example, let's look at our Zornhau. I'm not just throwing my arms under. I can, but that's not a very effective cut. I start using the pull and push of the lever to get that tip getting some more velocity. I do the same on the high line, and it starts playing a little bit different, where now my cut becomes more that nice little snap. I'm not stopping my arms, I'm adding to them. My baseline is here, right? Added to it is here, which gives me a nicer cut. I'm bouncing off Eric's head because our masks are very good at what they do, but all that force is hitting right on the top the way I want to, making that nice bloom, or alternatively, plucking into a frame. Now, this again, depending upon what you want to do. If I'm just cutting Eric down, by all means, I don't even need to relax my hands. I can just bring it down. But if I am anticipating him trying to guard, adding that snap to it doesn't do me any harm. I'm going to wound him on the head. Head wounds bleed like you wouldn't believe, and then I can move on to whatever I was going to do next. Because like with all of our Meisterhau, and I'll talk about this when I sum it up at the end, is there's the cut version, which is possibly inherently less lethal, and then there's the thrust that follows it, which is probably much more lethal. But again, just put a pin in that at the end of the series. So, once more, and it should be just noted that they describe doing it on the shoulder. I throw it from here because it emphasizes it more, but it can be done from either. It's not just arms, it's not just arms with spring, it is also arm spring relaxation, and there, because my distance, I even got down the face and into the thrust, which we'll get to later. Now, let's switch sides and show a couple more of those, and we'll talk about the whole alber thing. So again, not just down the spring, but also down spring relaxation, nice solid cut. Okay, so now let's talk about alber. Alber is one of those that can be a couple different things. It depends upon how he gets there. There is, in my opinion, two versions of alber. There's alber, the guard, wherein, and I'll stand sideways for this, I am purposely putting my sword out in front of me. This is basically the same as long point, but my sword is directed down at the floor. This is meant to give an invitation and to basically keep myself at the ready. So anything comes in, I can raise my blade up, or I can do various other actions, especially turning up into one of your oxes from extension is a thing I like to do a lot. Then there's alber like more off to your side, which I would argue is just vexel, but people will tend to hold their alber more akin to an iron gate between their between their legs. This alber is more about the slashing, more about covering back onto the left side, and things along those lines. This one is usually one that people move into, versus this is one that people take. Now, the biggest danger when it comes to opposing alber with the Schaitelhau, and I don't think this is actually a historical danger, this is more of a modern danger, is people choosing to ignore it. You're cutting high, they see, especially if the distance is far enough, they'll see your hands as a target. If they really don't care, they'll see your body as a target, and they'll put their point in the way and you run onto it. Now, in regards to making sure that's all off the table, that's going to be when you throw it. But in regards to just mentality, I do want to bring this up. Yes, absolutely. Eric is in one of his albers. I start bringing this cut down, and he puts his blade up. That is a thing to be concerned about. That's number one, why I'm choosing to only spring to a certain point. Now, we're about the same height. This is not something I want to bet on. But essentially, if we find ourselves, and by all means lift it, if we find ourselves in a situation where I see that opening and I start to go for it, because I was only springing so far and not all the way into him, this is something I can avoid. Just the straight lift, I can avoid it because there was a temperance there. Do I think this is necessarily 100% historical? No, it's just my fencing advice. In regards to him cutting my hands, the more someone's alber is like loaded over to the side and they're kind of leaning into it, the more likely they are to flick up at you. I don't personally even worry about these. If I'm throwing a cut from above and he raises up to try and touch my hands, so freaking what, right? Blade, hands, doesn't matter. Take the same opening. He's doing what I want, which is worrying about the high line. And if he wants to trade his head for a pinky, that's on you, buddy, right? Now, to avoid both of these, the best way to get around them is when you throw it. And this is where we kind of have to skip ahead in the book to talk about knockgrass. Now, the two times he would move into alber, the most common way is that he just did a cut. This will put him into more of the loaded diagonal alber more often than not, unless he was cutting quite sheerly. In which case, the second batch past me, I'm making a choice. And this is where the Scheitelhau comes in. So for example, for just the basic knockrising section, let's go shoulder to shoulder. He cuts at me, I avoid, I cut at him, great, end of story. However, if he's a little more aware, because I do want to be a little further away, I like to go ahead and hedge my bets a bit further by making sure when Eric does a cover, he's going to have to go all the way up. So this becomes much more the idea of spring way high, which I'll also point out where Eric's sword is. If I'd thrown that straight from my right shoulder, it would have been in the way. Because I threw it at him and sprung at him, it missed. I'll get back to that again in a second. But this choice then leads into, and this time Eric, feel free to parry either in prone or whatever, it leads to a very particular fight dynamic, which is he ends up in alber, I spring at him, and now everything is worried about that high line. Hit or no hit, Eric is in a predictable place from which he can only do two things that we'll talk about again later, and both of which give me more time than him. This is also where we get the whole Oberlaufen thing, the idea of a strike from above outreaching a strike from below. I'm going to talk more about this next week, but it's basically the idea of, it's not a literal physical distance thing, it's a, he's down at the floor, I'm coming from above, the point in space, i.e. his head, that we're both trying to reach at the same time, I'm always going to get there faster than him, because he's fighting gravity, I'm not. Again, we'll get to that again later, but I just want to mention it here. So this is all coming up me. The choice to throw the Schaitelhau here as a Nachreisen, not just because there's a big opening, but to go ahead and hedge my bets further, makes this flow very, very well. So one more time of that. He throws an over, I spring in at him to get it up high to the top, and that's what allows me to drive him high or strike him when he might have been anticipating a wider cut. Now, the next time to take it is when someone is taking alber. This one is a little trickier. In general, most people don't just, well, some of us do, don't just approach and take alber and dare you to come on. More often than not, it's either an absent-minded thing or it's an intentional opening / giving distance. More often than not, someone's going to be standing in a point forward guard or things along those lines and whatever, and he moves down in it to see what I will do. My advice is when someone does this, your only choice should be the Schaitelhau. To do anything else is not in your best interest. So to go back to last week, if I were to try and like crump down on his blade to suppress it, I'm fencing short and giving him opportunities, and he's the one who set the stage. Alternatively, by moving down and I try to do something, maybe I go for more like a wide springing over, he's also set up to various different things. Even simpler than that, just track me over with your point, right? Uh-oh. I'm the one who's having to do all the hard work because he took it, set the stage, and anything short of the Scheitel does not really fuss Eric. However, we're moving around, we're fighting, and he does move into that space. Let's take that bet. Let's see what happens. Am I guaranteed to hit him? No. Am I guaranteed he has to react to this, though? Yes. And the way he has to react is always with his hilt. Unless he chooses for both of us to die, there are things in place to make that less likely. Now, that general taking the bait is something that really just takes practice. You essentially just have to tell yourself, hey, anytime we're moving around in fencing or what have you, if he makes an invitation, just go for it. Just see what happens and cut resolutely. He will guard or he will not. That's how you start getting people to be aware of your cut in your training environment and respect it. And you know, if you've got someone who's just going to tag your hands or try to stick the point out, the point shouldn't be that much of a problem, but the hand tag, again, head for a pinky. I'm okay with that. Now, the other opportunity is when someone takes it less intentionally. This I find is very common if someone's a little more right leg heavy. For example, you may find yourself in situations where you have prolonged bind exchanges or winding back and forth against each other and whatever, and there's that moment of pause where I start coming back more like I'm going to leave. He might take this opportunity to drop his guard down to rest, as since I'm leaving, there's no point in following me at the moment. He can just drop it down from where he is. And the more right leg heavy or on his right leg he is, the less likely he is to step backward or forward. This is a time to re-engage, and this is where you throw it more from the shoulder. So for sake of, we're both in long point, and it's like, okay, we've just done a big exchange. I'm going to start retreating. He's going to start retreating. Fire! And this is really where that hand comes in. Because again, I'm not trying to throw a sword or anything like that that can give him angle. I'm trying to, from where we are, okay, I'm going to leave straight line. And the more extended and nice you get it, the more he's going to have to use his hilt, which is all good for me. Now the final way of throwing the Schaitelhau that I want to discuss is the one I accidentally got earlier, which is to do it as a thrust. And this is an initial thrust. This is again not actually in Peter von Danzig's Zettel, which is what we've been working out of. This is a preference of Blue, but he likes to throw it as something from a little further away. The idea being that I'll still take the same opening, for example, but it's that out, then the point goes in. So this is essentially a inverted Scheitelhau, I guess you could think of it as. It's an onsetzer. Rather than me thrusting from below or turning, it's me casting this point out nice and high so that the tip goes in over what he might want to do. This is also quite good against people who just want to bring their sword up in the middle. So for example, I'm just going to throw it over. Eric's going to just meet me in a bind. Cool. I throw that little bit of extra extension into it, and it starts snapping over ever so slightly. I really like using it for that, in particular for shorter fighters. It's a great way to pop right over someone's shield and get a good little touch in there. But either way, that's the way, at times, I like to throw the Schaitelhau to make it more useful. Another thing you can do is anytime that someone is expecting you to cut around, instead cut for the top of the head. This is much less of the Scheitelhau and more of just taking the Scheitel line. But again, I threaten, he pushes me off, rather than going all the way over here, or taking a hand, or the myriad of other things that people expect, right for the very top of the head, to get them having to guard a lot tighter than they're used to, and that's going to lead into a lot of fun, narrow bind options that may not otherwise be presented. In particular, if you can get going to your right, pretty good opportunity, but that's beyond the scope of what the book says. So, thank you very much, Eric, and thank you all very much for watching. Next week, we're going to go over him dealing with it and adding more and more pieces to the Scheitel, because it's just like with the Zornhau never failing, so too does the Scheitelhau never fail. It just adds another piece, which is really just all the Meisterhau in general. So, thank you very much for watching. We will go over some other techniques another time.